The first question that you asked in many different ways was about scaffolding and differentiation. So there were questions about what's the difference between scaffolding and differentiation, when do I scaffold, when do I remove the scaffold, how do I scaffold, provide different kinds of scaffolds in a linguistically diverse class. So to start with, scaffolding and differentiation, they are related terms, but they come from different theories. Okay, so scaffolding is mainly related to Vygotsky's theory of the zone of proximal development. So Vygotsky believed that in a social, that learning was social, and that we learned with the help of others, especially more competent others, with the help of materials and the environment around us. So these three things help us learn and gain knowledge, right? And language is one of the things that we learn this way. Differentiation comes from a theory from the field of special education, and it is related to how you can provide different supports for different learners at different levels of proficiency or learning. Okay, so the two theories are related, but they come from different fields. So to go back to the question of how do I provide different scaffolds for, let's say, English language learners and English speakers, that's always a challenge. And it will be, if you have a very diverse class, you will be providing different kinds of scaffolds for different groups of students. However, I was always a teacher, for example, that would provide similar scaffolds but would require different results from different students because they were at different levels of production, right? So a student at a level 1 cannot produce the same as a student at a level advanced level or an English speaker. So so having multiple ways for the learners to produce something like visually or through different media. These are some ways you can also scaffold at the level of production. But other teachers, they provide different kinds of scaffolds. So for example, providing different kinds of graphic organizers with sentence frames, with more vocabulary support. So these are some of the things that you can do. But the most powerful scaffold is the scaffold of peer collaboration. And you saw in the project-based learning videos how students work together well, given that they had a purpose and scaffold supports to support every learner, right? And what they could do at that level. So we will be exploring peer collaboration more throughout the course, especially in the next 2 weeks where you're going to be reading chapters 2 and 3. So where Gibbons is going to explain a whole theory of group work and the importance of talk, okay, for English language learners. So I'll hold on to that a little bit because I want us to have more in-depth discussions about that. Another question that came up a lot was about when do I remove scaffolds? So that has to do with assessment. You have to learn how to assess students to know where they are so that you can remove scaffolds that are no longer needed. However, I have a caveat about this because every time new learning is introduced, you will need scaffolds again. So every time we're learning new things, we need support. We need other people to help us understand. We need an environment that will be conducive to understanding. So in a way, you're always using these scaffolds. However, it's important to learn how to assess the learners and see where they are so that you'll know how to remove or move the students, right, to different groups or different activities. So that's a matter of assessment. We'll be doing some assessment in this course, and you'll always have the opportunities to also have the opportunity to do it in other courses as well, especially TESOL 2 and the assessment course if you're taking that course. Language difference versus language disability was also a hot topic in the forum. So I should say that it's important, and we have speech language pathologists in our class There are bilingual special, and that makes you very special because to identify a learning disability, you need that learning disability needs to be identified in the student's home language because in the beginning it's very hard to differentiate between the process of second language acquisition, right? And whether it's a learning disability because many things are the same. So the students take more time to process things because the memory is overloaded with so much information. The learners are quiet and silent, so many of them will choose not to talk because they are still learning and absorbing everything, so they need more time. So, as a rule of thumb, you need to wait a little bit to give the learner time and space to learn because language learning takes time. Even for kids, they're not going to learn in 1 month. Okay, so 1 year is the bare minimum. And during that year, they will learn a lot. They will learn social language, they will learn how to interact with peers. But academic language wise, that takes longer. So for students, it takes 5 to 7 years to learn academic language. And remember that an English speaker child that enters kindergarten, they have been speaking English for 5 years. So they have a lot of vocabulary, a lot of familiarity with the language. So it's different. So there are so many variables involved. Another variable also that is important is home support. Okay, so if they are talking at home, if they are having interactions, if they are talking about learning in their home language, in English, if they have more exposure, that will make a difference for their learning in school as well. So there are many variables to consider. Okay, in terms of scaffolding, it's important that once the child has been identified with a learning disability, then you have an English language learner with special needs. Then you have to combine both kinds of what I call general scaffolds for special needs children. So you use the same strategies, the same scaffolds for special needs combined with what I call language scaffolds. So language scaffolds are specific to language acquisition. So they include vocabulary, they include syntax, they include discourse, pragmatics, cultural pragmatics. So we're going to be exploring these scaffolds, okay? But you have to combine both kinds of scaffolds. We talked a little bit about peer collaboration that came up a lot in the forum, and I will hold on to that, as I said, because chapters 2 and 3 will delve into that, because for children to be able to learn a language, they need to be immersed in a social environment. So peer collaboration is the ideal environment for learning. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the importance of that and how important that is for language learning specifically. Other questions that came up had to do with very specific things. So, for example, for math, scaffolds for math. When you are designing your lesson 1, I'm going to give you some examples for math. So you'll see how that applies for content like math. In TESOL 2, you'll be looking at content specifically, but I like to combine content a lot. Content-based education is something that we do in TESOL because language does not happen in isolation. So you're learning language to be able to perform in the content. So you'll have a lot of opportunities to see different examples, okay, for different content areas, science too, and social studies. So we'll see different examples.